This is the biggest regret that I've ever had from the time I was in Malaysia Airlines. I had wanted really strongly that we would put a merger between Malaysia Airlines and
Welcome to the Game of Impossible podcast. My name is Leon. This is my dad, Idris Jala. We are a father-son podcast where we discuss all things transformation through the lens of business, leadership, sport, as well as faith. You know, Dad, we've been talking a lot about your work in PEMANDU, the consulting work.
Right.
But perhaps what is not spoken about enough is actually some of the work that you do in the area of M&A, mergers and acquisitions, deal structuring, which is what I think you do a lot of in your role as co-chairman at Sunway Group, as well as chairman at Heineken, both publicly listed companies. This talk of deal structuring, I think typically a lot of us can have a slightly more simplistic view that deal structuring is all about the quantum, the price. But actually there's a lot more to it. How do you assess whether or not the deal works for you and is mutually beneficial for both parties?
Yeah, the why is very, very important. Before you go and do any M&A, you must be very clear about those three things. One is about revenue, the other one's about cost, the third one is about beating the competition. So let me take them one in turn. The first one is about, let me talk about costs. If you want to do an M&A, particularly when you are merging two different companies, putting them together, there's always an element of cost synergy. That means you take out what's a duplication in terms of cost, in terms of office space, in terms of HR, in terms of IT, in terms of sales force. You remove the duplicates, so you achieve cost synergies. If you're an airline, get rid of dual flights in certain destinations. So that's the cost synergy. The other one is you then leverage on each other's strength to then increase your revenue growth. And that is actually a very big component. There are tremendous opportunities for getting market access using technologies that another party, another company has, so that leverage your strength in another area, and certain expertise that they have to put them together to grow in the revenue. And the third one is putting two companies together put you in an almost unassailable position to beat the competition in many, many cases. So those were the three. After you've done all that, you structure the deal so that when you structure the deal, you will then be able to achieve the real benefit of cost, synergies, the revenue expansion, as well as the beating the competition. The effect of that will increase your profit after tax. It will also increase your revenue growth. And finally, what will surprise many people, it will increase total shareholder return, which is effectively share price in most layman's term. Total shareholder returns, the dividends, as well as the share price. So when those measures come together, then you are very clear right from beginning. You said, this is how I'm going to do it. You deal, you put a structure that will best capture the value of the M&A that you are acquiring. The same thing with acquisition. So I talk a lot about the merger side. When I acquire a company, you acquire a company for the same reasons as I put before. Mainly for making sure you get tremendous opportunity for platform for growth, for beating the competition that will arrive at results where your profit after tax will increase, your revenue growth will also increase, your total shareholder return will also increase. I mean, then that's unassailable.
Do you want to maybe share some examples of what this has looked like? Maybe you can start with talking about Sunway.
Yeah, Sunway. I've been a co-chairman for a while now. We have always been unhappy about the fact that the market, i.e. the stock market, never gave us a premium for being a conglomerate. The share price remained at 1 ringgit 50 cents, thereabout, for a very long time. It never took an appreciation despite the increase in revenue. And we've been wondering, what is the thing that we can do to really make a difference in total shareholder return in share price? And so that people, the market will value us more than they did. Around mid-2021, we decided that we were going to invite a competition for people to bid so that we sell 16% of our shares in our Sunway Healthcare. Only the Sunway Healthcare, not for the total group. So we put up a beauty contest. So many parties came to make the bids. The winner in that bid was GIC, Government Investment Company of Singapore. So we then structured the deal, and then they bought in, and they paid 750 million ringgit for 16% of Sunway Healthcare. Now, that what they paid for 750 million, if you gross it up for the total amount for just the healthcare business in Sunway, that's actually equivalent for the total market cap of the whole Sunway Group. And so most analysts started to wonder if the Singaporean, the government investment company, this is a very kiasu group of people, they cannot be daft. They must have done the homework. And so most people started to look at this. And as a result of them doing this, and they paid for this,
ends up driving up your valuation
absolutely
tremendously.
So as a result of that, many subsequent valuation, when MAS-AirAsia was being sold, and from Sarawak, the hospital, and also the recent Subang Jaya Medical Center, it was sold, they were more or less using the same valuation that GIC paid for our stake. And because of that, Leon, what had happened was, everybody concluded that Sunway shares was undervalued. And so from June 2021, soon after all those things transpired, our share price rose from 1 ringgit 50 cent all the way up to 4 ringgit. That's actually a phenomenal increase. That's 167% increase in our share price over a 3-year period. And that basically increased our market cap by 14 billion ringgit. And so the total market cap when we started was a meager 8.4 billion. It rose altogether to 22.4 billion. So the increment in market cap for Sunway over that 3-year period was 14 billion ringgit.
Yeah.
That's actually phenomenal, actually. Existing shareholders of Sunway are extremely happy with this. So, of course, then we had 750 million in our balance sheet. And of course, that helped us with our growth. So we were able to expand in Penang. We did many different expansion for our hospital beds, our new Tower D that we could develop in Sunway Medical Center. So tremendous without increasing our gearing. And so we had 750 million.
And we talk a lot about this, about not having, not being so over leveraged. We talk a lot about this in previous episodes, and this is a great way to do that and still ensure growth.
So I would say that thing that we did out there, that particular deal that we did to sell 16%, it was a fantastic masterstroke.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the numbers always make sense, right? I mean, we look at, you just before we started recording, you were talking about Facebook acquiring Instagram.
Yeah.
So this was back in 2012. And at the time of acquisition, I think Instagram had something like 30 million users.
Yeah.
And then that quickly rose to 1 billion users by 2021. And now Instagram contributes $33 billion US dollars annually to Facebook, or now Meta's total revenue, which is insane. So I mean, obviously, if you look at the numbers alone, you would think that it's a no-brainer for people to engage in mergers, acquisitions, and things like that. But I'm curious, how do we know when it's not a good time to acquire?
So I think it's this. When you do the valuation, so when Facebook acquired Instagram, they always have two choices. They do it themselves without acquiring, or they buy. Because when you buy, there's a price to be paid. So you make your valuation on the basis of all the things I said before, platform for growth, cost synergy, etc., and then you see how you beat the competition. If you think the price is too much, then you need to walk away. You do your proper due diligence to make sure the cost benefit, how much you're going to pay, what's the price you're going to pay. If it's too much, then you might as well go and do it yourself. But of course, when you do it yourself, it will take a long time to go and do it. There's a cost associated with doing it yourself too. There's tremendous learning process in doing it yourself. So these are the negative side. But you have to make the trade-off. If the price is over the top, much bigger than the synergy value that I talked about before, the revenue growth, as well as your edge over the competition, then you should walk away from it. The second thing, I believe, the most important thing, despite all this, everything I talked about before is a calculation in the mind, you put on a piece of paper. In reality, this is where most M&A fail because they don't hardwire the deal.
What do you mean by that?
Hardwire the deal, meaning to say, when two companies agree that they're going to do an M&A, they agree to merge, they will say, oh, in principle, we agree this is the cost synergies, this is a revenue platform, this is how we beat the competition. All of that's general at 30,000 feet. But they have never worked it down to the levels of detail. If you work it to the level of detail, for example, if you say we merge two companies, there will be 10,000 people that will be out of jobs. Then you say, who are those people? From which company? In which division? How many staff? When you do that, then you must put it down in the agreement. We agree to merge the two companies because this is exactly what we will do. When people do a deal at a high level and they sign a deal at M&A at 30,000 feet, in the principle, the problem is when they go down to implement and they say, oh, we cannot execute this because we have union challenges. We're dealing with the 10,000 people that we're going to tackle. And so these are the problem. The problem is they work it at the general level. They have never hardwired it in an agreement. So I would say, critical for any deal to happen, do not sign an M&A deal at the 30,000 feet when you have not been able to bring it down to operational detail and sign it at the detailed operational level. And this is where the rubber hits the road.
Speaking on looking at kind of operational details, let's see you've gone through all of that, and on paper everything makes sense. The structure is good, and you've gone through that level of granularity. But are there not some things, or you also mentioned synergies earlier, certain synergies that will be very hard to determine at the level of the negotiation and will only become apparent once the actual merger or the acquisition takes place? And what I mean by this is, let's say two companies, they merge. They're both competitors in the same industry, and obviously, if they were to merge, then it just makes a lot of sense because then they can dominate the market together and leverage on each other's strengths as well. But with that, it's also quite likely that both companies probably have very different ways of operating, different processes, and within that, different cultures as well. So, in your experience, how do you first assess culture fit? And then once the merger or acquisition has happened, how do you navigate that? Obviously, that you're never going to find a perfect match in culture. So surely there has to be some sort of period of getting both sides to assimilate. And what does that look like for you in the past?
Well, the best way to illustrate that answer to that question is to give a real example. We just interviewed last week Tony Fernandez.
Great episode, by the way. Do check it out. Episode 28.
There was a merger, you may recall, for 1 year between Malaysia Airlines and AirAsia.
Actually, I completely forgot about that.
There was a merger and it failed. It didn't work. And I can tell you the reasons why it failed from my vantage point was they were quick to agree that there are cost synergies, there is revenue synergies by putting it together. They will be able to beat the competition. All those 3 points are tick in the box at 30,000 feet. And they rush into agreeing, let's go and do it. They sign the deal and then they announce. Now they're going to go and implement it to achieve the synergies. Then the problem arises. Then you run into cultural difficulties. The culture in Malaysia Airlines is different from AirAsia, quite obvious. But you can't assess that at a theoretical level. You have to go and look at it specific. Let me take them one by one. If they were to say that we're going to do the cost synergy, okay, let's take it one by one. So we say manpower. Is there any reduction in manpower that you talked about before? If you say yes, where is going to come from? Do you go remove parts of people in AirAsia that say Asia, all of their maintenance work, they will outsource to Malaysia Airlines, for example. And do you then remove sales people? Remove sales because duplicate. You have sales force for Malaysia Airlines in Indonesia. You have it also for MAS-AirAsia? Do you merge
Correct.
the two together? And if you merge, who's out of a job? Then you can ask the question, can you absorb this, culturally speaking? Who's going to handle these? So there are lots of costs. And for example, on one destination, say Kuching to Kuching, let's say one example, Kuching to Kuala Lumpur, all the flights between the two of them, who is going to cut flight with overcapacity? You have to determine that in the operational hardwiring detail. Yeah. If you then agree upfront, then you actually didn't come out to make those agreements right down below.
Yeah.
Then you're going to run into a lot of difficulty. So I believe they would have been able to assess the cultural fit if they went out to look at the hard-nosed operational detail to assess, can we culturally absorb this? Can my team in my organization can accept this kind of real trade-offs that we're going to make? Then you're not theoretical about it, then it's very real. If they did that at the very beginning, they might have said, actually, we can't do this. Right from beginning, we don't need to sign this deal. Because you had wasted so much time and agro going through trying to do that. In the end, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so I would say this very point that I'd say the failure of people who went into M&A to translate the synergies down to operational detail and hardwiring them to operational agreements at the time of signing, that's the failure. That's why 70% of M&As globally fail. Only 30% the ones that succeed. Yeah. And this huge studies done by McKinsey and many others that studied M&As. The conclusion is majority of them fail, very few succeed. And I view it singularly to the failure of nailing down the high-level merger plan into operational detail. And that should have been done hardwired into an operational agreement right at the start of the synergy.
Obviously, we're assessing this from afar. So, Tony, if you're watching this, please feel free to weigh in as well. Perhaps we can do a part 2 of the episode. Yeah. We can maybe hypothesize what that might have looked like if it was a collaboration between MAS under Idris Jala's leadership and Idris Jala and Tony Fernandez collaboration. But on the topic of operational detail, I'm actually curious to know, and also because this is an area that I have stepped into in this season while you've been on sabbatical, stepping in as the interim chairman. It's to be honest, it's a strange kind of role to be in, because you are essentially supposed to be non-executive, not so entrenched in the day-to-day. So it's an interesting tension to hold of not being too. Not having too much of a tight fist on things and letting things run while still being able to chip in. So it's something, to be honest, that I'm still figuring out.
But you guys are doing really well. I look at from a distance, I see the results are fantastic. I'm very pleased with the results so far. Last 6 months is just fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but it's taken a while to ease into the role. Good. I think the first 3 months, obviously not knowing what was the right amount to chip in. But I'm curious for you, having been just the nature of your job, and it's what you always preach, you're an evangelist for detail and having a very, very clear 3-foot operational plan. And in your previous roles, holding executive roles, CEO at PEMANDU, MAS, Shell, you've got just a bit more authority to be able to dictate and control those sorts of outcomes. But I'm just curious, how has that looked like for you in Sunway or even Heineken in the area of looking at these sorts of deals with GIC, for example? Yeah. Not having an executive role, how do you ensure that those who are really ironing out that deal are able to go through that same level of detail?
Sunway is a very interesting experience for me because it's the first time I have worked as a co-chairman, and together with Sir Jeffrey Chia, and he's a real solid entrepreneur. And so working with him, I'm non-executive, he's executive, he's founder, he's the majority shareholder as well, but he's a gentleman. So we talk really very frankly about robust discussion about what the future is for how to move forward. So he tapped in a lot of my views in moving forward. But I see the complementarity. As you rightly pointed, I'm a detail kind of guy, and I really want to look at the details. Does it really, really work? And so the combined approach that we use there, he's an entrepreneur, he can smell the opportunity, and he also has a very good knack for what work and what will not work. And because he's just a natural, he's an entrepreneur. So I think when we did that, it's very easy for us to work together. But Heineken is different. I'm the chairman there, I'm not executive. But to me, the deal that was done by Heineken, when Heineken came in, the question was, if we wanted to grow our market share in Malaysia, big time, from poultry said less than 50% to now jump to more than 60% market share. How do we do it? Do we do it organically or do we do it through M&A? And the wisdom of the group was that we will go through an M&A. So we bought Diageo's stake in Guinness Anchor Berhad. So when we bought all of their stake, Heineken bought it. So immediately the brand Tiger suddenly belonged to Heineken Malaysia. All the brands, including Guinness Stout, is sold through our network. So when we did that, all of a sudden, our market share catapulted from less than 50% to more than 60% of the market. So not only did we do that, then we began to make sure that we achieve the synergies. When Roland came back, we got Roland as the new managing director.
Roland Bala, fellow Kalabit.
The joke that people had was the CEO at the time, the CEO of Heineken Malaysia is Kalabit, and the chairman is also Kalabit. And so the joke that they had, people said, because my name is Malay, they thought I'm a Malay, and they thought that he's Indian
because of the surname Bala.
But anyway, putting aside what happened during the pandemic, if you put aside, remove the pandemic, the year of the pandemic, we've had year-on-year record profit because we were able to make sure the synergies are derived from the combined strength of the many brands that we put together. We were then able to use the strength of one another to grow the business. And our share price really, really rose. Phenomenal increase in our share price. Share price actually jumped from 14 ringgit to 24 ringgit in a very, very short period of time. And so not only did we do that, in terms of performance, for a small country as Malaysia, Heineken Malaysia is now among the top tier companies in the Heineken group, in the whole group. It's among the top 10.
Yeah.
So because if we put up the synergies and then derive the results as a result of doing this, then you will really, really rock. So I'm very proud to say that in my time in Heineken, together with the role of the previous managing directors and particularly with Roland in the chair, he's now moved on. And with Kenneth Chu he played a really big part from the regional standpoint, making sure that there's winning coalition between the center as well as the region, and then using the things that we were doing here to really then move the pieces forward. And that's why I think when you start putting things together, it's really, really wonderful. I can see the growth. Even then, during the pandemic years, it was an opportunity for us to get things right. So we did what we call SR.
Yeah.
We look at business processes, eliminate what's unnecessary, simplify what is too complicated in our business processes, standardize them, and then only automated them. We got rid of so many things that were unnecessary, so we reduced our costs quite significantly. So I believe as a result of that pandemic, we were able to clean up house big time. So Roland and I really had a long chat about what is it that we're going to do with this crisis. How do we come out from it and really move the pieces forward? It's wonderful. So I can see in all places what we were doing in Heineken and what we were doing in Sunway. Two different approaches, but the results are still very outstanding. And for example that I gave before, we, by the way, on M&A issues, we have passed a few deals. The Island Hospital in Penang, there was out for BT contest.
Okay.
We decided not to put up a bid.
Right.
Because when we looked at it, and we thought, in our view, that the amount of money that we would be paying for that deal would be too much when we evaluate it against the synergies that we'll derive from doing it. It's better that we do it on our own. So we decided to say, no, we're not going to put up our bid. So there are some time when you say, you make the valuation and you say, we're not prepared to. We didn't lose. We didn't even bid for it.
On that topic, are there deals that either you walked away from or just that didn't materialize that maybe looking back you regret?
Oh yeah, I tell you, this is the biggest regret that I've ever had from the time I was in Malaysia Airlines. I had wanted really strongly that we would put a merger between Malaysia Airlines and Qantas. So I spent nearly 2 years of my life on this deal because I wanted not only to discuss it at high level, but to ground it at 3 feet.
Yeah.
And so we did do that. I can tell you, Leon, why I regret it didn't happen was, if the deal was to happen, what he would have done was that he would have catapulted the combined strength of Qantas and Malaysia Airlines to become the 6th largest airline in the world, and number 1 in Asia Pacific, far beating the competition.
What was the ranking at the time? Do you recall?
We were down below. They were less than 30 and we were maybe 50.
Okay.
If we put it together, we were 6th in the world, beating Cathay Pacific, beating Singapore Airlines. And let me describe how we were going to structure the deal. And we were inspired by the merger that took place with KLM as well as Air France. That means if we merge the two airlines, we will not pay cash to buy each other's shares.
Okay.
We will exchange shares.
I
So
see.
we valued both companies because we both publicly listed. And the valuation suggests that they were much bigger than us, the Qantas. So that means we would own 30% of Qantas. We still remain dual listing. They are still listed and we are still listed. We still keep our brand. They will then own 70% of Malaysia Airlines. And
the size of company is determined by valuation.
we took the market cap. We took the market cap and we looked at other indices such as how many aircraft and assets you have. But once we did that, we did the valuation, we do the cross-holding. And when we did that, this is where the benefits would have happened to MAS. In the hardwiring, we knew exactly the detail would have meant that they would have prepared to move all of the Qantas planes. Instead of flying from Australia, landing in Changi, they now will leave Changi, they come to KLIA. And they will connect with all our flights. And that they will feed in. So no longer in there. So that's one. That means KLIA would have been a boon for KLIA. Number 2, all of the Qantas planes will be repaired and maintained by Malaysia Airlines because we were doing it cheaper and better. And that's agreed. They agreed they will do that. And we went down lounge by lounge at airport by airport, Leon. For example, we concluded that we had a lounge, airport lounge in Sydney. They had one. We knew that their lounge was better. We closed ours and we used their lounge. In that we both have dual lounges in Heathrow. They closed their lounge. They use our lounge. Sales office in Jakarta. Our sales office was better than theirs. They closed their sales office. They use our sales people. Vice versa. And we were able to achieve the cost synergies because we went down to the level of detail. And as a result of these kinds of detail, there were tremendous value associated with the cost of doing this. Frankly speaking, the CEO then was Jeff Dixon. Jeff Dixon and I did this under tremendous levels of detail. In fact, I can tell you, we even brought it almost as highest level as possible. There was even a meeting in Putrajaya that involved the Prime Minister of Australia, then John Howard, together with our Prime Minister now, Tun Abdullah Badawi, in Putrajaya. I was there together with Jeff Dixon. And we both concluded it's a great idea and that we wanted to proceed and do with this. Unfortunately, it died simply because there were some political pressures to say that, politically we cannot defend this because the optical illusion arising from an accusation that the Aussies now own Malaysia Airlines 70%, although we own 30% of them and they're much bigger. And so this was the optical resistance that was put forward to it. And it was as a result of this that the whole idea had collapsed. I had spent nearly 2 years of my life working this operational detail, and we had agreed that this was a wonderful thing to do, and we would have made it tremendous opportunities to do it. And there were so many opportunities. We had bought already then the A380, and they didn't get the A380, and they loved the fact that we were the ones that had the A380. They don't need to do that. They were using our planes. They will fill our aircraft. Leon, this was to me, if this had happened, the share price of Malaysia Airlines would have catapulted well beyond the imagination of Khazanah. And I think they would have made tremendous opportunities. Today is almost worthless, the share price. To my mind, that's a deal that I regret for the life of me, that because we went as far as we got. And by the way, I didn't say that we had a general 30,000 feet. We had already done it at the operational level. The detail was me and Tengku Azmil. Tengku Azmil was my deputy. Tengku Azmil and I worked so much in such level of detail, at that level of detail to go and operationalize. We went flight by flight, where every single flight, every single day, we went out to that level of details and how we're going to do it. I tell you, Leon, that would have been tremendous opportunity for not only for Malaysia Airlines, but for KLIA, as well as seriously making Malaysia, in particular KLIA, as a hub for Asia Pacific. I really think that would have been a real game changer. If you ask me today, if that had happened, what would have happened to the destiny of Qantas in Malaysia Airlines is unassailable in the competition.
So it seems that there was a bit of nationalism at play here, in terms of wanting to manage that narrative of this being, a Malaysian brand, a Malaysian carrier, and having an Australian company take the majority and quite a significant majority stake in the company would, dilute the brand. But it goes back to this idea that it's not always about, sometimes it's not necessarily about the value or even the percentage of shareholding alone. Because in this case, like you mentioned, Malaysia Airlines would have only had 30%. So if you look at that 30% versus 70%, people might think, oh, that looks kind of unfair. But then when you talked about that level of detail, with that, there would be, number one, cost savings and cost efficiencies by reducing the number of lounges required. But then also, like you said, it's strategic because then you essentially create new levers for revenue by channeling other flights, channeling more aircraft into KLIA, having KLIA become more of a hub. And then also, like you said, the maintenance, again, another lever for revenue. So I think there are a lot more things that sometimes, I guess the takeaway here is sometimes we need to, number one, look at really the operational plan at a greater level of detail to see where the opportunities are beyond just what's at face value. But then also to look at the long term and to think not be so short-sighted in only looking at contract value, share percentage on paper.
If not for political optics, that deal would have been the best deal for Malaysia Airlines and Qantas, without doubt, hands down. Because I don't talk about it theoretically. I'm talking about real numbers because we knew it. We brought it down to operational detail. And the fact of the matter was, at that time when I was there, we were the king of MRO in the region because we had the best MRO capability. At that time, already Qantas had their aircraft maintained by us. So they knew how good our MRO work was, maintenance and repair and overhaul. They knew how good our engineers were. And we were repairing all the aircraft, many of the big aircraft from Jet Airways. Saudi sent the aircraft over for us to repair. Even Continental at the time, we repaired 18 of the aircraft. They flew all the way from the US for us to repair and maintain them. One of the problems that we talked about today in Malaysia is the flight delays and diversions is all down to MRO capability. And so at that time, we had tremendous capability to maintain aircraft. That's why our safety standards was second to none. It was really very good. So the Aussies knew that was our strength. And they were so expensive in Australia to maintain and repair and overhaul an aircraft. You can have to pay a bomb for doing that over there. But the amount of savings that they have by coming out, sending the aircraft for us to repair for them, it's win-win for both sides. So we would have been able to grow our business there big time. We paid good bonuses for our engineers. Our engineers would have really had a field day repairing, and tremendous opportunities for personal growth. And the other interesting thing was, we said that in the future when we merge, all our cabin crew will have a mix Australian cabin crew and Malaysian on all planes.
I see. All planes.
All planes.
Okay.
So we'll put Malaysians on the Qantas plane, and we put Aussies on our Qantas plane. Then we have a real mix of East and West on it. Because at that time, for 3 years running or 4 years running, we were judged as the best cabin crew among the top best cabin crew in the world. And so they really liked the fact that we had our cabin crew were the best in the world by Skytrack measures and etc. So they said, why don't we bring some of the Malaysian hospitality onto our planes, and then the customers will love it. So there was tremendous synergies. So if you ask me today, that's my biggest regret.
On the topic of that, maybe we can close with this. I think just decision making in general, whether it's an M&A at a corporate level, or whether you're just as an individual investing in something, obviously there's going to be always a degree of risk. There's always a chance that something doesn't work out. How do you, maybe for both the regular person listening, how do we regulate to ensure that we are operating objectively and not on our emotions? So that means, first of all, ensuring that we say yes to the right deal. But even if, let's say, in this case, if there are deals that maybe don't work out and you kind of live with a bit of regret, how do you move forward from that? What have been maybe some mindset shifts for you, or perspectives, or even maybe habits that have helped you to deal with these sorts of things and to live a life of no regrets?
If you live a life of no regrets, I think always you must say that you've done your best. And I genuinely believe that with regards to that, I really believe I've done my best on it. But there were things outside my control. The political optics was just outside my control. That's beyond my pay grade. When it was decided that politically they couldn't do it, and that, So the second thing that you have to do is you must look at the true north measures. And if people are confused about the true north, then that's become the problem. In the airline business, it was very clear that true north measures were on profitability, total shareholder return, and revenue growth. It was very clear we had ticked in the boxes, 100% in all of these. But unfortunately, then you have a government-linked company, because this is a government-linked company. There are political things associated with that. And I can understand it. I don't begrudge them making those political decisions. That's not my call as the CEO of Malaysia Airlines. My call as CEO of airlines will look at the interests of the airlines clearly from the numbers without doubt. And I know and argued my case. I can tell you very specifically, I can conclude without doubt, it's refutable that the why we needed to do it, and almost a certainty that it will be achieved, because we had hardwired into operational agreement. I can tell you the operational agreement was this thick because we went down to the level of detail, route by route, flight by flight, aircraft by aircraft. We done all that. So I knew exactly what it meant. So I don't regret it from my personal standpoint. I regret it for the airline. I regret it for the country. I regret it for the country, and I regret it for the airline. Personally, I don't shoot myself in the head for having done it. So because it said I've done my best, it didn't work. I accept the fact that there are other people whose pay grade, like the Prime Minister, make decision on behalf of the country and not mine. And so I said that's my job, and I squarely lay it down there. I regret it for the airline. I regret it for the country.
Well, I think that's a great place to end today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed it. It's a slightly different topic today, but certainly one that's been very enjoyable for us as well. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We post videos weekly every Friday at 6 a.m. on YouTube as well as Spotify. We also have short form content on IG as well as TikTok, and you can find us at The Game of Impossible. So thank you for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.